Hi and welcome back to my channel. I am Koala and this is my little nook in this end of the universe that we call YouTube. I am a shamanic practitioner, mainly within Nordic shamanism, and I'm here today to continue our journey with the Nordic gods. I have already made a video on Odin, and there are two more videos after this one about Thor and Balder, and in this video I'm going to talk about Loki. So, yes, in this video I will talk about who Loki is. That's the biggest part of this video. Who is Loki? Okay? And then I'm going to talk about my relationship with Loki. Can we, should we, and how summon or call upon Loki, honor him, celebrate him. And then I will thank you for being here, for watching my videos. And before I go into Loki, I just want to remind you that you should absolutely subscribe to my channel, and I want you to like this video, and then I want you to comment if you have any questions or if you just want to let me know that you've been here. So, let's get into it, shall we? So, Loki. Right. Loki is not a god at all from the beginning. He is a giant, and his parents are Farbauta and Löfni or Null. If I need to mention the mother, I will say Null. And he has two brothers, Helblinde, which means completely blind, and then Beläst, which I don't know what that means, if it means anything specific. So, he entered the realm of the gods when he became a foster brother to Odin. And this doesn't mean that he and Odin grew up together. There's a story behind their relationship that I will talk about later on in this video. I just wanted to mention Odin as Loki's brother because of the family tree that I am currently mentioning here. So, Loki has a lot of children, right? There's stories behind all of those, or with all of those. So, he has 3 sons with Sigyn, and Sigyn and him has Vale and Narve. And then he has 3 children with the giantess Angerboda. And with her he has the Fenrir, he has Jörgen, and he has Hel. And Hel is the goddess of the death realm. And there is also stories about him being the sole parent of Hel, and that is due to him swallowing a woman's heart, a burnt woman's heart. So he swallowed that whole and became pregnant by that, and then he gave birth to Hel. So that's one story about Hel, and and then there's the story about him having the 3 monstrous children with Angerboda, Fenrir, Jörgen, and Hel. And I've already talked about this a little bit because I've made videos about Jörgen and Fenrir already, and I mentioned their parentage in those videos. And then Loki is also the mother of Sleipnir. And Sleipnir is born after Loki had relations with a stallion called Svadilfarne. Okay, so Loki is known to bend the gender, to not conform to gender at all. So that is one thing I like about him. And he is the god that has this relationship to gender. He kind of hops on, from one to another. He doesn't mind, giving birth, apparently. And he also doesn't mind wearing women's clothes. And then we can argue that he does that because it's a part of the personas or roles that he takes on when he's trying to trick the other gods into getting into trouble, of course. Is it a part of Loki's personality and his identity, or is it just something that he does to joke around. You know, we can talk about that all day. So now I'm gonna go into the relationship he has with Odin. And he's supposed to be the foster brother of Odin, but he's not what you think it is. So they didn't grow up together. So being a foster brother to someone in the Nordic mythology or Norse mythology means that they are blood brothers. They have exchanged blood at some point or offered blood to become brothers. And it seems like the most common reason for this is to become allies, to form a pact to not harm each other and to work together. There's also a part of this that means that if I were to form a pact with or form an alliance with someone through this ritual, then if I died first, the other person would have to avenge my death, and vice versa. So in the sources, this is mentioned as a ritual where 2 or more men form a pact or alliance that puts them into the relationship to each other as if they were brothers. So that's what that means. And in this rite, it's described in 2 different sources, one called Gisle Surssons saga and the other Thorstein saga Vikingasöner. This ritual is in 3 parts. You dig up some earth, some of the soil. You dig up the soil, and then you mix blood, and then you say the oath, or you pronounce the oath. And in another description of this, it is literally described that they cut their hands like this, but nowhere does it say that they actually like blend the blood like this. I think my interpretation of the different sources so far is that you give the blood to the earth and it's mixed in the earth, and that is and then you say the oath, you know, when you do this, and that makes you blood brother. So it's not like you cut your hands and do like this, like in pop culture or something like that. And I think it's rather nice that you give it to the Earth Mother, and then she's like, yeah, I've received this, you are brothers now. Something like that. That's my visualization of it anyway. So it isn't mentioned that they explicitly mix each other, like blend blood with each other or exchange blood with each other, but that seems to be the purpose of cutting your arms open and bleeding. So this mix of bloods is supposed to give you the traits of the other person, and then also make you brothers or siblings. So the myth says that Odin and Loki has mixed their blood in the beginning of time, urtiden, the ancient beginning of time. And Loki often reminds Odin of this. Among other places he does this when the other gods doesn't want him to join the feast at Aegir's hall, and Aegir is the god of the sea. So there is of course this big long poem. There's of course this big long poem called Lokasenna, where Loki takes part in this feast at Aegir's hall, and then he ends up just spewing the attacks on all of the gods and calling them names and that sort of thing, until I think it is Thor that interrupts him and threatens him, and then he backs off. So before this happens, before they enter the hall, the gods doesn't want Loki there, so he says, "Oh, do you remember, Odin? that once upon a time we mixed blood. You said that ale you will never drink unless both of us were invited. So that's my translation of that. I hope you can't hear the noises from outside. So so he says, like, you promised, remember, you said that you wouldn't drink beer with anyone or drink ale with anyone or mjöd if I wasn't there as well. So yeah, he's invited, and then he just makes a shit show of it like usual. So you can understand that Loki had things to gain by becoming a blood brother to Odin, but what did Odin have to gain by becoming a blood brother to Loki? So according to different sources, this can only be explained by Odin having this crave for knowledge and the wisdom, and that he wanted the traits of Loki that was his shining intelligence, and that Odin would take any consequence that came of it as long as he would gain the intelligence of Loki. So this also puts a spin on like Loki's personality, like the view of Loki's personality, because he's often described as a trickster, a jester, and there's a question about, is he just cunning or is he mean? Because Loki is known for, getting the other gods into situations and then helping them out of it as well. And he's just there to stir the pot, basically. So does he do that from a point of being evil, or does he do it from the point of just wanting to stir the pot because he's a jester and he wants stuff to happen, basically? He just enters a situation, he's like, let's see if we can just make something happen. It's boring here. Let's do something. So which one is he? And then we get into the fact that a lot of the sources that mentions Loki as this more evil character are from a period of time where Christianity entered the Nordic countries, Scandinavia, right? So the authors could have been influenced by that. And there are stories where he is basically described as the little devil that comes in and just turns things upside down, or he's the little devil sitting on the god's shoulders, or like talking to them in their ear, and is like, you should do like this, And different scientists that has looked into all of these sources more than I have say that he is he's often compared to the devil in Christian lore and in Christian stories, and that Christianity made him evil, and that isn't unusual, that this happened to a lot of the gods, that they were, we call it like black painted, like painted in darker shades, when Christianity came into the picture. So that had an effect on the authors of the time. And when I read that the first time, and the second and the third during my investigation into Loki for this video, I was reminded that the first time I read Lokasenna many moons ago, I wasn't keen on it, and I was like, no, that's not Loki. I don't feel like Loki is this little devil. He's just a trickster. He's just a jester. He just wants to have fun. He's not a bad guy, and I think I wanted him to not be the bad guy, of course, but I also feel like I had this aversion to that version of Loki, and when I read that Lokasenna is one of the sources, one of the poems that could have been influenced by Christianity's view on Loki and the Nordic gods, and that the author of Lokasenna could have been influenced by this and made him this way. That kind of made sense to me. It was like I felt like, oh, that's why I don't like this, because it stands out from the earlier sources that I grew up with, and I don't remember ever being told Lokasenna when growing up. I was told other things, and I was told a lot. There's a lot of stories about Loki that I heard when I was growing up, that I grew up with them, and they shaped my view of him, of course. So what I'm trying to say is that it makes sense to me that this would have been influenced by Christianity and Christian belief, the Christian spin on the Nordic gods. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I want to continue this story talking a little bit about what happened to Loki and the fall of Balder, but I'm gonna kind of skim through the fall of Balder, and I'm gonna talk more about Balder in a dedicated video. a video dedicated to Balder. So yeah, it says like this: a lot of people has tried to get a grip on Loki, but few have succeeded. Folkeström, that's a name, uses words like bizarre, burlesque, infamous, and deceivious when he describes Loki. But he underlines that Loki is not only a negative force, he's intelligent, playful, and full of tricks and ideas. He is portrayed as a bit of a unlucky bird. I don't know the translation of that phrase into English. And this has to do with, amongst other things, the fall of Balder. And that is the murder of Balder. But he isn't a completely evil character. Just as often he helps the gods from getting out of trouble, and especially when they get into trouble with the giants. And the giants are a part of Loki's parentage, remember that. And so what is the fall of Balder? What is the murder of Balder? So, the story goes that Loki, dressed as a woman, came up to Frigg, one of the goddesses, and asked about the gods. And Frigg told Loki that she thought was just a human woman. That she told him a lot about the gods. And one of the things she mentioned was that Balder is almost invincible because she has made sure that nothing can harm him. So she's like put spells on everything that they can't harm. She's harm Balder. So he's invincible, but not completely, because she also mentions that she has forgot, or she hasn't gotten to one plant yet. One single plant, that's all it takes, guys. So Loki's like, And then he goes and grabs a piece of this plant, and he makes it into an arrow, and he gives it to Hönr. And he says to Hönr, why don't you shoot Balder with this one? And Hönr doesn't believe that Balder can die. So he grabs the arrow and he's like, yeah, sure, I can do this, basically. I'm gonna go deeper into this in another video. And anyway, he ends up firing the arrow and killing Balder. And the story continues with Balder going to the realm of the dead, and Hel saying, you can have the Balder back. Tells that to the gods, because the gods are like, what? Balder died? No. And she says, if all of the gods cry over his death, then you will have him back. Now, there is no source that I have come across. If you have one, please put them in the comments and I will check it out. But there's no source that I have come across that explicitly says that Loki didn't cry over Balder. There's no explicit source that says that he didn't cry, and it doesn't say who didn't cry. But all of the sources seem to say that Balder didn't come back from the dead. He's still with Hel. So, was it Loki that didn't cry over Balder and so he didn't come back? And is Loki actually one of the gods in that case? So just because he didn't cry, Balder couldn't come back? Or what happened? I don't know. But Loki is deemed responsible for the death of Balder. Like, he planned it. He wasn't the one shooting, but you know, it's his fault. So the gods punish him for this. And they punish him by sending him, not just because of this, also because of everything he said at Aegir's Hall. So remember that. They are still mad about all of the things that he said about them over there. So anyway, he was dragged to a cave where he was tied by 3 big rocks, and he was tied with his son's intestines. Skadi put a poisonous snake above his face. So he's like lying there, and the poisonous snake is dripping poison onto his face. And Loki's very loyal wife, Sigyn, sits there guarding, and she has this bowl, and this is a story I grew up with. So she has this bowl that captures the dripping poison, but she only has one bowl. So sometimes she needs to just, you know, turn around and pour it out. And when she does that, he's actually, you know, getting the poison on his face, and he's in agony, and every time he twists and turns and screams, there's an earthquake, basically. And that's where he is until the end of time, until Ragnarok. And about that, this is what it says. In the final battle, he will show his true face. Before Ragnarok, he will get out of the chains that the gods has put him in, and at that time he will be the commander of a ship from Jotunheim, the home of the giants, and he will be on the giants' side against the gods. And also, you might remember that 2 of his children kills gods. I'm just gonna put that out there. Do you remember? Which of his children kills gods in the final battle of Ragnarok? So, there is this poem called Voluspá, and it's the part 51 that talks about Loki and his part in the final battle. I must admit that my Icelandic is not good enough, and my ancient Icelandic, like ancient Norse, isn't good enough to properly translate it. So I'm just going to tell you what it's about, and that is based on other translations I have read into Swedish, okay? So this poem talks about how the ship that Loki is governing comes from the east, and that he has like a fleet of warriors on this, and the warriors are the offspring of Fifel, like in the offspring of giants. So they come with the wolf, and I would say that that's Fenrir. And then also Bilips, which is one brother, one of the brothers of Loki. So he comes with his ship, and he is the captain of this ship, or the commander of this ship that comes from Jotunheim with the offspring of giants, or a fleet of giants, offspring of the giants, and together with also Fenrir, because he is an offspring of giants. He's an offspring of Loki and Angerboda. And Angerboda is a giantess. So, and then also the brother of Loki that is a giant. So that is what that is about. And remember that, as I said, remember 2 of his offspring ends up killing gods. Do you remember which offspring of Loki kills gods and what gods? Do you? If you pay attention, you should know. I'm just joking. So, yeah. Is that it? I think I just want to end this by talking about something very important. I'm going to talk about my relationship with him, of course, but I also want to say that is very much on par with what I'm going to say now. So, the last thing about Loki I'm going to say is that there are so many stories with Loki. He's a part of a lot of different stories. He's mentioned in the Edda. He's mentioned in Lokasenna, of course, because that's all about him. And he's mentioned in other stories as well, and other poems as well. Poems that I haven't been able to read for this video. I haven't found them, but in their entirety. But yeah, there's so many stories about him. But there's one important aspect to think about. There are no sources that ever say that Loki was a part of the culture here in the Nordic. So he's a part of the stories about the gods. He's this jester that comes in, stirs the pot and then helps people out of of whatever they have he have put them in, or whatever. He always gains something from helping them. There's a lot of stories, but there are no sources that say that there are a lot of sources that mention this, that there are no sources that predates these poems that talk about Loki being a part of the everyday culture or the shamanic culture of the Nordic countries. So he doesn't seem to be a character that is actually part of the practice or everyday life, because there are no places named after him. There are no stories about how people offer to him, or blotade, like no meals were held in his honor, no mead were drank in his name, no one cheered, no one seemed to have, there's no cult or something around him. There's no one that seems to have honored him or worshipped him in any way. He might be a later addition. He might just be a literary figure that has been put into these stories as someone who just, when there needed to be some humor to it. So, my personal relationship with him is very much tied to the same question. Is he actually, or was he a part of the culture? Or is he just a literary figure, a character that we have made up? And of course, we can argue that all of the gods and goddesses are made up by people, and that they are a part of the culture and any culture because of, our imagination and our ability to see and name different forces. So I think my issue is that in my personal practice, my Nordic shamanic practice, there are no journeys where I usually meet Loki. He's not a guide, he's not a pathfinder, he's not someone that shows me the way or helps me with something. He's not a god that I come across when I want to work with different forces. There are so many forces I can name by naming the gods. There are, aspects of my practice that are very much tied to Thor, to Odin, to Frey, to Baldur, to Heimdall. There are so many gods and goddesses that I work with on a regular basis, and I know why I work with them. So Loki, he's a trickster, and the trickster isn't a force that I call upon when I want something done, because it's an unpredictable force. He is this chaotic, but not chaotic in like the chaotic force of the universe that we attribute to the giants. The giants come with a chaotic force that is necessary for creation and for things to happen. It's a force that comes into creation when things needs to be stirred up and then, settled again, and we can see where we are, and it shapes the landscape, it helps us create, and it shapes the world. But Loki is this little character that just, seemed to come from nowhere. He's almost like a virus. He is this little character that comes from nowhere, and just messes around, and he doesn't seem to have any real purpose, and therefore he doesn't really have his own place in the practice. And I feel like he really is like the foster brother of Odin. He's like he's not one of the forces of universe. He's just this. He's like this outsider that someone was just like, oh yeah, you can be with us because I want your intelligence and I want this and that. So yeah, you can be a part of us. He tricked his way into it, and so as I'm talking about this, I feel like maybe he is a symbol of that kind of interruption that can happen, the unpredictability of the universe. And in one source, he's even mentioned as a personification of fate, because the fate is unpredictable. But back to my relationship with him, and back to the original question: is he simply a literary figure, or is he a part of the culture and a part of shamanism? I can't really answer that. I know that I have never met him in my journeys. I've never worked with him in healing, in Seder, or anything like that. I enjoy Loki as a character. I enjoy his, trickstery. I enjoy his jokes. And I enjoy him, but more in my free time than in my practice. So when we come to the question, do we honor Loki? Do we celebrate Loki? Do we summon or call upon Loki? And should we? I would say that I don't think I would ever call upon him or summon him. If he were to show up in some way, he would do it as the trickster to teach me something. We can see him as maybe a force that comes through when we need to learn a lesson or two, but he hasn't really come through for me in that regard either. But I would never intentionally call upon him because he is too unpredictable. If I want a chaotic force, I call upon the giants, and I become my own inner giant to do that. I would never become my own inner Loki to trick people. That's not something that I feel like I wanna, embody. And when it comes to honoring him or celebrate him, sure, I can absolutely honor him and celebrate him, and I feel like I do, but not intentionally. I don't hold feasts. No one has ever held a feast in Loki's honor, with no one, I mean not me and not in the sources I have read. I don't know if there are other practitioners today that does that. I don't speak for them. But yeah, there's no one that really holds feasts in his honor, because there's nothing tied to him that we want in our lives. Like, we can honor and celebrate Frey when we want something to do with like the harvest, or something like that, and the same with the Njord when it comes to traveling overseas, or we can honor Aegir and we can offer to Aegir to be able to work with the ocean and the sea. We can honor Odin for reasons I have mentioned in his video. We can honor a lot of the other gods and goddesses for different reasons. We can call upon them when we want specific things done or to manifest things in our lives. There's nothing we can really manifest with Loki in that regard, so he isn't a part of my practice. I can honor him as a part of the universe, like as a character and everything that he stands for. But I don't know. We can honor him. We can celebrate him. The question is why. So, is he just like this little literary character that came into the stories to mix things up? And was he ever a part of the culture before? Maybe he was, but no one wanted anything to do with what he stood for, so that's why no one honored him or held feasts in his honor. People just trying to ignore him. Maybe they didn't want those things. But we also know that when people didn't want something in the olden days, they usually offered to that god or goddess to not have to deal with it. Like, please don't bring doom over us, we will give you this. But not even that has anyone done with Loki. So yeah, I think it's very interesting that there aren't a single place named after him. There isn't anything tied to him that seems to point to that he was revered or honored in any way. And it's also interesting when I sat down and thought about this, and I was like, he's never shown up in any of my journeys. And I have never ever thought of honoring him, getting to know him at all, And this is even though I grew up on stories about the gods and about Loki. I have heard the story about him and Baldur hundreds of times, thousands of times. I've heard the story about him and his punishment, and Sigyn holding the bowl to capture the poison so it doesn't fall on him, hundreds of times, and different versions of that. And just as I have heard so many stories about the other gods, but I have never once thought that, oh, I want to do this, so I need the power of Loki. Never. What do you think? Do you think there are situations where we should maybe call upon Loki? Do you think he should have that part, that role in the modern practice? Where does he fit? Do you have an opinion? Do you have a wish? So, with that said, thank you for watching, thank you for following, commenting, liking this video, and thank you for being here. I do have a Patreon if you want to see more videos, and if you want to join me in ceremonies, I have a tier for that. If you want to take a course on the runes or other courses in the future, I have a tier course called Apprentice. And if you want all of the above, I have a tier called Shamanic Practitioner. And if you just want to support me, I have the free tier and tier Curious. Check it out, and I will see you soon. Walk in beauty, if you can, with Loki. Tjingeling!